Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yes, pass them out. Absolutely. Hot off the press. I would like to call the Cuyahoga County Committee of the Whole Regional Transportation Advisory Subcommittee meeting for Thursday, December 14th, 2017 to order. The clerk will please call the roll.
Calling the roll, Mr. Miller.
Here.
Ms. Conwell. Ms. Gallucci. Ms. Gallucci is absent at the moment. Mr. Feliciano.
Present.
Ms. Richardson Scott.
Present.
Mr. Singh.
Here.
Mr. Osby. Mr. Osby is absent at the moment. Mr. Mitterholzer. Mr. Mitterholzer is absent at the moment. We have a quorum.
Okay. Thank you very much. And do we have anybody signed in for public comment related to the agenda?
Yes, Mr. McCarthy.
Welcome to the committee.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. My name is Dan McCarthy. I'm a resident of Cleveland, and I'm an everyday RTA rider. I'm a student. I benefit from the UPass program, and I graduated with a degree in public transportation planning from Levin College at Cleveland State, and I'm currently a first-year law student at Cleveland Marshall. So the purpose I wanted to come to speak to the committee. I read the final report, and I really appreciate the committee's work at identifying the problems that we're having regarding revenue in Cuyahoga County when it comes to Greater Cleveland Regional Transit, the GCRTA. I know the kind of ins and outs and how it's tied to state funding, the loss of the Medicaid managed care revenue, and how that's going to be super detrimental to RTA in its operating budget going forward. And I know that is really going to take effect, after this fiscal year. So I have noticed, I've been riding for probably 12 years now, and I just really would like to urge that while the committee has identified the problem, that this committee continue to work and make sure they pass some kind of policy or propose some kind of policy that affects the solution. I know out of the report they talk about a sales tax and a property tax. I know regional transit authorities can use property tax, and if that failed at the county level, then they could go to the largest municipality, so you could theoretically have Cleveland pass the millage up to 5 mills. And I know that sales tax, we're the highest in the state, so I don't know if voters really would want to do that, because we're pretty tapped out on that. So something I'm proposing, why I know we need something that really will inject large amounts of revenue, something like a sales tax or property tax. In the interim, in August 2018, the all-day fare is going to go up to $6. Monthly pass is going to be over $100, and one-way is going to be $275. That's obscene, considering the fiscal health of the region and the fact that a median household income in Cleveland is $25,000. New York City, for example, MTA, their one-way fare is $275. Their system's much more expansive, and you're talking about a median household income of $60,000, right? So, so what I'm proposing here is something Chicago just did. I'd like you to consider. They're taxing ground transportation networks, which are basically Uber and Lyft. They had a fee. They regulate this industry, and they had a fee for the last few years. I think it was about 40 cents a ride. They're raising it by 15 cents a ride, and they're expecting to get $15 million, and they're going to give it to their public transportation system by raising the fee by 15 cents. This is something their mayor, Rahm Emanuel, proposed, and they just passed last month. So this is brand new. So I included in the packet I passed out basically the text of that amendment to the ordinance that already existed, the tax itself, which is a ground transportation tax, which taxes both taxis and Uber and Lyft. I would really focus on Uber and Lyft. I'm not trying to necessarily tax taxis, but then the regulations on Uber and Lyft, which is the ground transportation systems, I believe they're called. And that's basically just like, I guess, model legislation that I'm giving to the committee, because I really would like to see a policy that could raise some revenue to forego the fare increase, and then hopefully in the future there's a bigger revenue for the larger systemic issues.
Okay. Thank you very much. We need new ideas, and so we really appreciate your coming and presenting that to us. Okay, thank you. Yes.
Just real quick, this is actually the legislation that I was meaning to present and bring up for you. So I would just ask if we might be able to have this included as a recommendation or as like a potential stream in the report.
Okay. Do we have another person signed in for public comment?
Eric Johnson.
Okay, great.
Good afternoon. I went through the report. Pleased to see that people are taking it seriously. I just had a few addendums to add to the process, other opportunities. I wanted to have the group consider the potential for a transit tax district where do something similar to what's already being done in Portland. I had passed out some information the last time regarding what Portland does with regards to doing a transit tax that's paid through employers in their region, roughly 0.6% of it per tax. I have on the back sheet an example of what it would look like for transit, for if we were to have a transit district in each county, what it might be if we charge various amounts. And it's based on income tax. It's based on workforce and income tax and where people live. Also on the front page is an article about the transit tax that was passed by Indigo and the route they had to take with getting approval from their state legislators to actually have the tax. So it's just another route to actually provide resources for transit because the state is not going to be friendly, they're not going to be supportive. And we're going to have to come up with some localized ideas to help shore up the cost. If there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer.
Are you working from this one-page sheet, or is it a different?
On the back, there's a spreadsheet showing the breakout of what a transit tax might look like.
Understood. Yes, district. I see that. Okay.
And the front page is the article regarding the Indigo service.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your testimony.
Mr. Raphael.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Councilwoman Conwell, members of the committee. My name is Rich Raphael. I'm here today representing Clevelanders for Public Transit. And basically, I came after having had a chance to read and study the draft report to say thank you. Thank you for your efforts. Thank you for the scope of the work that you have done. And thank you for helping us to make public transit a priority in this region. It's my understanding that public transit after today will be a part of the responsibility of the Operations and Intergovernmental Relations Committee, and we're very happy to hear that. We're looking forward to continuing our partnership with County Council to see what we can do, as Mr. Johnson said, and I agree with him, by the way, that we do need to continue to explore more localized solutions, because even if the state does decide at some point to find a permanent solution, things down in Columbus move quite a bit slowly, and I don't think we can afford to wait. So again, thank you very much for all of your time and all of your efforts in this. And Mr. Miller, thank you, and Council President Brady especially, for the decision to continue the work within another standing committee at Council. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else?
No one else signed in.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the November 30th, 2017 meeting. And I would note that Ms. Galucci is now at the meeting. Thank you very much. Is there a motion relative to those minutes?
Second.
Motion is to approve the minutes from November 30th. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
There are no legislative matters referred to the committee. And before we get to our main discussion item, which is the final report, I would like to talk to some about something that Mr. Raphael alluded to, and some of the committee members don't even know about yet. But as you know, a number of people testified at the last meeting of this committee, saying that the committee should not end today, and asked that we continue this work. And also, about 6 or 7 people came to the county council meeting on Tuesday and testified to the same effect. And we recognize the need for there to be continuity. We've all worked very hard, and we've done a lot this year, and we wouldn't want all this work to just come to a screeching halt and end with the end of this committee's time. But we also felt that that we've kind of done what we can do with this particular format, but we came up with another solution. And the county council has a permanent standing committee, the Council Operations and Intergovernmental Relations Committee, and most of the work we do around public transportation is intergovernmental in nature. We work with RTA, we work with the state around the budget process, we're concerned about federal funding, and so this is an intergovernmental relations issue, and actually that committee could probably work on public transportation issues now under the intergovernmental relations scope. Just in the past, they have not, and so we came up with the idea of formally amending the scope of that committee to add public transportation to its name, and for the committee to have public transportation under its scope of authority, giving it the capability to continue the work that we've started here. And I discussed this idea with Council President Brady and with our Vice Chair Yvonne and with Councilwoman Nan Baker, who is going to be the chairperson of that committee in 2018, and they're all in support of the proposal. And what it would take is at a future county council meeting, we would need to pass a rule change that would amend the scope of the committee, and so we're planning to do that, and we also modified the draft report to include that change, so it's included in the final report. So if there's I would just ask if there's any questions, comments, or concerns from the committee on that, and if not, we're going to move in that direction. Yes, Ms. Conwell.
The chair, I'd like to just share with Grace Gallucci, NOACA. This by any means is not that we will not work with NOACA in January in terms of getting the stakeholders and things of that nature. We just want to be able to respond to the residents that they really don't want county council to lose an oversight of any nature. So I think this is a great solution when you're up and ready for us to have those discussions. I think something's going on at NOACA right now, and it was the end of January. We're looking to really move that forward. So I just wanted to let you know, and the committee members know, this is just being an addition. And then maybe that can also be a forum where whatever that stakeholder committee ends up being, they can come and share with the committee at county council, and it'd be more broad span.
I'm very glad that you mentioned that. This is in addition to, and it in no way affects our plans to develop a high-level stakeholder advocacy group, and that's the number one recommendation in the draft report. So that's that part. Okay, so that,
Mr. Chair,
yes.
if I heard you correctly, I wanted to clarify that as a result of the additional scope for that committee, did you also say that the name of the committee would be changing to incorporate?
We're going to propose that the Council Operation and Intergovernmental Relations Committee, the name of the committee will be proposed to be changed to Council Operations, Intergovernmental Relations, and Public Transportation, so that it's specifically referenced, and we have a home for doing work on public transportation within the permanent committee structure of the county council.
Thank you for that point of clarification.
Yeah. Okay.
Choir PT, because
Yeah.
we kind of call it choir
Yeah.
now.
Right.
Right.
Oh, okay. So that brings us to the committee's final report, which you have in front of you, and it is not greatly changed from the draft that we studied at the last meeting. But I would like to take a few moments and explain what the significant changes are. The first one, and this was in response to suggestions about having a succinct list of the recommendations. We did that via adding an executive summary. So that's at the beginning of the report. We also added a table of contents. And as mentioned, we incorporated the recommendation about expanding the scope of the Council Operation and Intergovernmental Relations Committee into the report. It's discussed in the main recommendations and also briefly alluded to in the executive summary and the conclusion. The section about funding through the Volkswagen settlement is updated with very recent information. On December 7th, the Ohio EPA issued a proposal for use of these funds in which 45 to 50% of the money would be used to repower or replace trucks and buses, including those in public transportation systems. And also, Cuyahoga County is one of the 14 high-priority counties for these funds. And so this could provide some source of some additional one-time capital funds, and so we make mention of that in the report. The next item, and on this item, a big thank you to Akshay, who at the last meeting of this committee pointed out that that the legislature changed the law where previously sales tax increments could only be done in increments of 0.25%. It now can be done at 0.1%. That's effective July 1 of 2018, and in this case that's highly significant because 0.25% yields about $50 million a year, which would be overkill in terms of replacing the lost MCO revenue, meaning that this led to suggestions of well, the county and the and RTA could do it collaboratively and split the revenue, but that's probably a much more complex and difficult undertaking. But with the 0.1%, it yields $20 million. It's almost an exact replacement of the lost MCO revenue. So it's definitely an option, and so we've modified the report to explain that and put that forward as a standalone option. The revenue section is also tweaked a little bit to suggest that GCRTA could wait until the next budget cycle, which will be completed by June 30th of 2019. The transition funds get you almost that far. It's some months short, but it would probably make sense to wait and see if the legislature comes up with a more permanent replacement on MCO sales tax revenue, and if not, then the committee recommends serious consideration be given to either the property tax millage or the sales tax millage, and the report suggests that there may be ways that RTA can find some operational efficiencies, but probably not of the magnitude to replace $20 million a year in revenue. And we kind of strike a balance in which we first of all the report is modified a little bit to point out that we did not delve into RTA operations in detail, and we don't claim to be experts on this, but we also say that a revenue loss of this magnitude can lead to being more creative in finding solutions, and also cost-saving technology is constantly improving, and so we do recommend that our RTA redouble efforts to find operating improvements and efficiencies, but we say the bottom line is they need more money. So that's that section. The section on fare increases, this came from Akshay. It's modified to discuss that the increases that are already in the works, that are scheduled for October or August of 2018. And also to point out that public transportation costs in Greater Cleveland are already high compared to other cities of similar size, limiting capacity for fare increases, and a detailed listing of the planned fare increases is provided as an appendix. Okay, so that's that. The list of prospective participants in the successor advocacy organization is added as Appendix 5 and referred to in the report. Also, the acknowledgement of public comment participants is augmented with the names of those who participated at the last meeting of this committee and the December 12th council meeting. So that's kind of a rundown on the changes in the report from the one that you saw on November 30th. So I would invite any comments or questions.
Will the people that spoke today, will they be added? The public
One thing that I'm going to ask for is a motion to allow non-substantive and technical corrections to be made, and we would do that. Eric Jones and Rich Raphael or Eric Johnson and Rick Raphael are already on the list. The only addition would be Dan McCarthy, and I would like to do that.
And I'd also like to say, in terms of, since you mentioned our staff that participated, Ashley has been at probably the last 3 meetings as well.
Okay, that's a good point. Yes.
I just wanted to comment, first of all, thanking the county, yourself, Chairman, and Vice Chairwoman Conwell, for taking on this very important committee function. I want us to, the report, I think, accurately reflects the work of the committee, and I think certainly suggests that there was a review and a comprehensive review in some cases, but as you said, we were not able to really delve into the GCRTA's operations, so it's hard to say at this point what would be the best avenue. Clearly, that's why you're going to continue taking on this work, but I do want to caution the committee and future discussions about this, about really making sure that any decisions, any outcomes are really focused in the right place. And what I mean by that is that the citizens of Cuyahoga County have been extremely generous when it comes to public transit. We are one of the few folks in the nation that have a 1-cent sales tax since 1974 with no sunset. Many places have to either continue to get renewals or have substantially lower. So I want us to be careful when considering taxing the same group of people over and over again. Clearly, the idea of perhaps an increase of a sales tax of 0.1% simply to make up the loss of sales tax relative to the MCO can be justified. I mean, that may be something that's logical and reasonable. Beyond that, I think we really still need to look at the overall cost of the system, the benefits of the system, who pays, who benefits, and how we look at re-articulating that structure. I also concur with many folks who have said this already. A fare increase would devastate the system. I can't even imagine how it is even being considered, in that we know fare increases have a substantial impact on ridership, and such a negative impact on ridership that they most often, when you're in this kind of situation, lead to a downward spiral. And the cost of our fares are out of market. They're certainly out of whack as compared to other cities our size, but more importantly, they've now become out of whack with other transportation modes that are available in the region. When it still costs just a couple of dollars to park in the downtown area, or it is still very low in other parts of the county when there is no substantial parking tax. Public transportation cannot compete. And with prices for gasoline having gone back down to a more acceptable level for the general consumer, a fare increase is disaster. I just really highly caution that and suggest that other types of increases in some taxes be looked at, but, and I'm sorry, I walked in as the gentleman was already speaking on the Chicago's transportation tax, particularly relative to taxi and Uber Lyft. Those are the kind of creative and innovative ways to generate revenue that make sense. And particularly when we're looking at it from our perspective at NOACA as to how do you create an equitable system for transportation, for all modes. So we're certainly concerned about keeping the automobile road network in good condition and available, but also really ensuring that those who either choose or need to take public transportation, bicycle and pedestrian modes, have those options. And we really need to think long and hard before we propose taxes, but those that allow for a more open and transparent and level, equitable kind of approaches are the ones that I think we really should move forward with. And I think looking to the tax that Chicago just passed the resolution on is a good example of innovation that would most likely not cause a tremendous amount of financial burden on anybody.
Any other comments? Mr. Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to Vice Chair Campbell for this last year of your work, for both your kind of vision with the future committee that will be at NOACA, as well as your urgency and your intention with recommending that the choir committee incorporate public transit. So just cannot thank you enough for that. I would want to second Director Galucci's comments about looking at essentially having one recommendation that covers essentially the looking into what revenues could be raised from these kind of new sources and revenues like Uber Lyft charges, or to the extent that the county is able to levy any charges on parking. We know the Port Authority has the ability to levy charges for impermeable surfaces. So there's a certain amount of there seems to be a certain amount of legal ability to identify specific types of zoning, like parking. Whether it's in the county, we know at the city level there's already an 8% city parking tax that all goes to the Cleveland Browns, but as Dan had mentioned, but that these are potential sources for revenue. When I was getting in on Prospect, the monthly parking cost is $85 at a lot for the theater district, which is the old cost for a monthly bus pass, which is about to be going up from $95 to $105 this upcoming year. So when faced with those kind of choices, just basic economics are really going to take hold, and figuring out how we can level the playing field for transit riders in an equitable way is really important. So thanks again.
Okay, thank you.
To the chair, do we have any information to know what is the sustainable bottom line that RTA could run on the fares? What was the previous fares before this last increase?
It's $225.
It was $225, and we're now, can we go to 6?
6
No.
for all day, and that's on page 61 too. Sorry, we got it in there. So that's the August 16, 17, 18, 19 fare schedule.
But prior to that, wasn't there an increase right before then too?
So that's what the prior is. So the first
Okay.
increase was last August.
225.
And then paratransit fares have actually gone up. They're going up in 17 and 19 as well. And fixed route is just 16 and 18.
So the prior, what was the last?
That first column is 225.
Right, but before then, what was it? What did it jump from?
But when did you?
So was it 03? 09? Oh, yeah, because it was
It was a while.
post-recession, yeah.
And that was when transfer policy was changed as well.
Right, but it was $2. Yeah, I thought it was in the ones. So I would love it to go back to when I was a kid, 21 years ago, not too long ago, but it was 13 cents. You know, how do we, when we think creatively, how do we get back, maybe not 13 cents because of inflation, but how do we realistically get back to that $1.75? Because when we talk about ridership, that'll bring the riders. If you increase your routes, and I mean, we have to think creatively, not just me, because I'm not into transportation, but those young minds that are at CSU studying this stuff, how do we realistically go back to 175, increase the routes? I guarantee it would increase the ridership. People that are taking cars and paying parking. Go ahead, Mr. Johnson, but I mean, I think that's what we need.
Just for historical perspective, transit within the last half century has never been able to pay for itself. It's always been subsidized. So that consideration of, how do we squeeze it back that far? The reality is the world we live in today is that it's a public good. Public transit is a public good. It's going to take public support. Gentleman the other day told me one of the reasons why they built League Park where they did is because the guy that owned the trolley service, he wanted it right there by his trolley system. We don't live in that world anymore. We live in a world where the substantial cost of operation, labor, and just responsibility for maintenance of the system is greater than being a cost where it can just be levied for just, the bottom line is that we can't. It's just not feasible right now. What would be good for us is to get to a point where we're talking about efficiencies, is to get to a point where we're providing service and usage where people are actually using service and we're going places that they're going. And we're taking people to where they want to go. But the nature of where we are now is that a lot of things we do based on historical usage, based on city structure and patterns, based on development of where, companies are, where places in socialization are. We're based on what we have out here. If Cleveland had developed with a structure that said every time you build something, you have to consider transit, we might not be sitting here, might not be looking at, this situation. But the point is that we're sprawled, and we're trying to meet demands and services that are, beyond really the capacity of where we are right now. So in future, I think one of the things that has to happen is development-wise, developers have to incur the cost for transit as well. Wherever you're going to build, maybe there needs to be a cost incurred for transit support, whether you tax the location for being off transit or, resources for getting transit there. One of the keys about the Oregon tax is that it's a tax on employers. So employers pay the tax because transit is getting their people to work. And I just, that's one of the reasons why I really want people to take a look at these options, not to be punitive with the people and the population, the general population, but people that actually, and businesses that are actually benefiting from the process and the use of public transit. Yeah, they need to pick up some of the cost. And a little more research into those processes, and I think we can find some answers. But the days of 13 cents, and I was there. I was there.
You were 12, right?
But anyway,
Okay.
but those are just about gone, and we really got to we really got to get people to understand that you know, public transit is a public good, and it needs public support.
If I may.
I certainly acknowledge the difficulties, and especially in a community like ours that we don't have the population density that we once had, and the cost effectiveness of public transportation is highly related to population density. I mean, that's why places like Chicago, New York, San Francisco, Atlanta, I mean, they have an advantage because of they have several million people in pretty close proximity. But I would like to point out that fares account for only 16% of GCRTA revenue. And what that means is that if you're able to find additional public funding sources, it takes a relatively modest amount to replace some fare. So that creates an opportunity. You know, if at some point down the line GCRTA does decide to propose a sales tax or a property tax measure, they might consider proposing a little bit more than the minimum required to replace the MCO sales tax loss and use the overage to roll back the fare increases a little bit.
No, that's exactly what I was going to say, and you and I must be around the same age in that I also remember the 12.5-cent round up to 13-cent fare. And for those of you who are much younger and may not remember this, let me give you the history and how we got there. And the transit systems in that day, and this was 1973, were in dire straits, worse than we are today. Okay. We had Cleveland CTS, we had Shaker Rapids, we had North Olmsted, Maple Heights. We had a number of systems that were all having the same issue. And the issue was with the investment in the highway infrastructure and the modernization of the automobile into daily life. Transit system ridership was declining, so they increased fares. How we got to the 13.5 cents fare, which by the way was really 50% of the full fare of 25 cents. So the full fare was 25 cents, so let's use that and compare it to the 275. But that was before there was a massive overhaul of the system. The CTS fare was 80-90 cents. So we're talking about a massive rollback. So it was close to $1 in 1973. That's huge. And why? Because the costs had outstripped the ability of the fares to pay as much as it used to. And similarly to what's happening now, the fare was starting to pay substantially less, and city general funds were having to subsidize. So a monumental change came, and it was called the Regional Transportation Authority, where we would look at massive savings because of an integrated system that would reduce overhead, be more efficient in planning, be more efficient in operations and service delivery. And in exchange, and this is exactly what our chairman is referring to, and in exchange for a 1% sales tax to make this system for the entire county work, the fare was rolled back from about $1 to 25 cents. And that's where we got that fare from. So I don't think it's impossible to go from $2.75 today to $1. I don't think that's impossible at all. And I would recommend, and for those of you that don't know, I was the RTA's budget and finance and management director for about 10 years and ran that system. And we did not have a fare increase the entire time I was there for 15 years. So I really feel strongly that there are innovative ways to solve the problem. And I'm not suggesting that RTA needs to only look at within, that there are external forces that are at play, that RTA needs assistance looking at other creative ways of generating additional revenue. But if the generous taxpayers of Cuyahoga County have to assume some other tax to support this system, we have to give them a break. And as Councilwoman Conwell said, if we give them that break, and I'm gonna propose going down to $1, if you do that, you will have such a surge in ridership that it should closely make up what you're losing. Because it is only, in fact, it's even gone down from what I recall. I thought it was about 20 cents, 20% of the fares covered by I'm sorry, 20% of the cost of the ride is covered by the fare. So if it's gone down to 16, again, we're headed to that downward spiral. The more you increase it, it's catastrophic. And I think we, at this point in time, have to freeze that ridership. It is too easy of a target to say we can generate a few more bucks here right now, and then 6 months, a year from now, it's the same problem again and worse.
So did we, on the back sheet that I handed out, I don't know if it's on your sheet or not, but we talk about transit districts and what the tax would look like if you did an income tax across multiple counties that are actually impacted by us as far as residents, workforce, and created transit districts where we, collect resources from beyond just Cuyahoga County. I think that really is the next step, where we look at a broader resource of funding and actually use those funds not just for us, but for those other areas as well. And then we get to the point we can look at the rollback, because we're actually gaining.
You have to look at the rollback anyway.
You have to.
Because you cannot, we're at a juncture that you can't keep increasing or you're not going to have any riders.
Right.
I mean, you got Uber. These seniors are going to start taking Uber and all that. You have to, even if we do this income tax thing, sharing it regional wide, in Northeast Ohio, you still got to give them some kind of reduction.
Absolutely.
Because you're already taxing them in their pocket.
Exactly. It's got to be a trade-off.
You got to.
And let me tell you about this regional system. And, I was the deputy executive director for the Chicago Regional Transportation Authority. We had 7 counties in the area for transportation, 6 specifically for transit. I absolutely wholeheartedly believe that here in Cleveland, we could have an effective regional transportation system that includes multiple counties. I will, however, say that it would be, at this point in time, extremely premature to go to 12 counties, which I think is what this page reflects. I think we would at least start with the 5 counties that we have in the NOACA footprint that allows us some jurisdiction in terms of bringing people together to have and facilitate those discussions. To that end, NOACA actually has a project in place. We've received a grant from ODOT to explore a regional transit system, a 5-county system. We will begin that project next year. Also recognizing, based on my experience in Chicago, it has to be that every county gets something and only pays for what they're getting relative to the others. It can't be looked at as a money grab, and it shouldn't be. This is a way to provide public services to all and looking at the most equitable way to pay. And I think it's a terrific idea, and I think that's where we should be. But again, there alone, it's not just about taxing people in a regional system. It's about how do we transform the delivery of that system in order to make that difference. And maybe the only other county that I would consider if we're going to go that way is perhaps Summit, because there is a tremendous amount of folks, I think, who do go back and forth between Summit and Cuyahoga. But.
Mr. Singh?
Just to add one more point to that, and I keep going back to the handout that Dan had brought, because it touches on even, a modest amount of tax on rideshare is enough for us to be providing fair relief, not to fill the MCO sales tax holes. Those are massive, those are big issues, but when we're talking about fair relief, we don't believe that this last fare increase yielded essentially what it was set to be, and that the next fare increase in August won't meet that mark either. Because it's losing so many riders in the process of increasing the fares. So you're getting more per rider, but you're losing a very significant amount of riders in the process. So it doesn't net exactly what the projections were in 2 years ago. And so, I really want to just emphasize on Director Gallucci and Councilwoman Conwell's points, and hopefully even in terms of recommendations. I know we already added a couple points, but that fair relief is a very strong priority for Cuyahoga County as we move forward.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
First of all, let me add my thanks to Chairman Miller and Co-Chairwoman Conwell for all of the hard work and staff on this report. It is an excellent report of the work that has been done by this committee. Going back to my Southern Baptist roots, I just have to say amen, Director Gallucci, and amen, Councilwoman Conwell, in terms of the comments that have been made in terms of rolling back fares. As someone who has worked with vulnerable populations in public transportation for many years, we get nowhere trying to reach a goal on the backs of the transit dependent. So I'd like to echo those sentiments. I'd also like to bring us back a little bit, if I can, and offer the suggestion that as we move forward with this report, that we look at parallel paths, because we did talk about having the report reflect the need to wait until the next budget cycle to see what happens at the state level in terms of actions. I'd like to not see us sit too long on our hands, but to take advantage of all of the creative solutions that have been suggested here and others that are out there to develop a parallel path and to do the work that needs to be done in ferreting out these solutions, so that whatever happens at the state level, this committee's report has finite recommendations that the standing committee and perhaps the advocacy group can move forward with immediately. I'd not like to see us hashing out these recommendations at that time.
Just one final point, that the income tax question is also a legislative question, so it's something that you have to start moving on, because it's not something that's in place right now. It took Indigo 4 years to get their process in. These ideas we're tossing out need to, like you say, need to be in the playing field now, because for us to wait till the next budget cycle, if you thought you were mad now, wait till then. I mean, part of the process, and one of the issues that greatly concerns our organization, is that by the time we get to 2019, what will we look like? We're trying to find an option to stave off this next increase. These things were done in a process where we were okay. We're definitely not okay now. So it's the paradigm has shifted. The resources shifted and diminished, and we are looking and trying to find ways immediately. Efficiency for us is we're a very efficient organization with regard to the process in operations management. I have to say, in watching our people go through the process and the deliberations they went through to actually, try to meet the service requests and demands of the public, it was a very, very taxing process. And they did the best they could with what they had. I just don't know if they can do it again. And we're at that point. We are really up against the wall. So I encourage us to remember that, going forward. We like to see, we're not fans of going up on fares. We're not fans of cutting service. But it's just the reality of where we are. And we are trying to find at least a short-term solution. Income tax, legislative action are things that are down the line. But we are, in terms right now, trying to find short-term solutions. Last week, I believe I passed out the information regarding the rainy day fund. The fact that the state continues to miss what is basically an opportunity cost with supporting transit. I mean, right now we sit here on the verge of possibly getting Amazon HQ2. But the point is that if we can't support the things that make organizations want to invest in communities like this, we're not going to get it. And we need that support from the state to make it happen. So I encourage you, contact state legislators, state senators specifically, and, bug them about rainy day access, rainy day fund access, because even if they say no to it, we need it to be on the public record that it was asked, and it has not been done yet.
Couple of points. First of all, the part about waiting till after the next budget cycle, that only applies to doing a local replacement of MCO sales tax revenue, which is a major undertaking. It doesn't apply to finding short-term solutions. The other thing is that the report does explicitly state that it should be a goal to get the state to use rainy day funds or other resources to keep us whole through fiscal year 2019, so that that they can work on a permanent fix without there being a gap in the middle where resources were not available. Yes, Ms. Conwell.
Question to the chair. The state is about to work on their capital budget, right? Or capital. So does that, in that capital budget, since you were down there, was there any dollars that came for transportation?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Do you think that would be an avenue that we could?
I don't think so.
Mr. Chair, to speak to Vice Chair Conwell's point, the state capital budget actually has language that is prohibitive for directly funding public transit. That being said, we are still working with members of the legislature in trying to find ways to address some of our capital needs in a more creative fashion. I actually have a meeting set up where we'll be going to talk to Representative Greenspan next week about that.
I would like to remind folks that when I worked at the RTA, this was in the 90s, so I can't speak too much before that, but since 1991, the state hasn't provided any funding for operations anyway. And so for us to continually want to push the state, recognizing that they have not been a partner and have not provided funds, is somewhat disingenuous, in that certainly the public transit system in Cuyahoga County, as well as the other parts of the state, would greatly benefit if the state provided funding. And in my opinion, the state should provide funding. But the fact that it has never provided much in the way of operating funding other than the elderly and fair assistance, and which has never been more than between $500,000 to $1 million a year, and I believe that's still in place. And so we have to look to other parts of the solution to keep the system as is. State funding allows us to grow it to be something that it has never been in the past. And that's where you get systems like in Chicago. They have a tremendous amount of state support, although my understanding is the state has cut back on that support because they don't have the funding. So let's keep that in mind too, that the state's a good straw man, but that isn't really the problem.
Okay. Well,
And sorry, if I may just add, remember, the federal government used to provide, and when they took it away was 1996, they used to provide, I want to say $7-8 million, and at the time the budget was probably $150 million. That's far more substantial of a loss that the RTA took and other transit systems took. And I would strongly suggest that there was some of the beginnings of the unraveling in terms of operating support. And so I have not heard us saying that we're going to go after additional federal funding. And that also might be something we still want to go back and push.
yeah, it is in the report.
Is it?
It is in the report. The report also says that we should vigorously pursue the options with the state, but then it adds that given the history that this cannot be relied upon, and then goes on to discuss the local options.
Yeah, I think the report does address all the things we're talking about. I'm sorry, I'm just getting very, very passionate about it and just wanting to make the statements and kind of, I guess, wrap up this in a way that keeps us all motivated.
I heard a couple of possible motions. And if anybody likes these motions, you can make a motion. But one would be to explicitly state that there should be no further fare increases, and that fare relief should be a major goal, and that any tax increase should be accompanied by a fare reduction.
Okay, second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Any opposed? Okay.
Thank you for that articulating it. I was thinking that, but I couldn't quite say it.
Okay, so that language will be incorporated into the report. The other thing is whether we should add a section that urges exploring these alternative sources of revenue, things such as the Uber or other transit system tax, the parking tax, the employer tax, and just says we should be creative and look at these things.
I'd like to make that motion.
Okay, is there a second?
If I may insert perhaps some language to use the word equitable in there somewhere. So certainly innovative or creative, but also equitable.
Okay, innovative and equitable. Okay.
And Mr. Chair, you're talking about utilizing all those ideas, not just one of those facets. Right?
Absolutely. Right now, we have no idea which would be practical and which would work, and which could actually be done, and which has political requirements that could actually be obtained. So yeah, we would have to keep an open mind. It would
using putting it on the backs of small businesses. It's always on the smaller populations. But as long as we're going to think of the ideas equitably, then
Any further discussion? Did we have a second? Yes, okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say no. Okay. The other motion that I would like, if someone could move, is that we authorize the chair working with staff to make editorial, non-substantive corrections as needed. Is there a motion to that effect?
I can make that motion.
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. Okay. And now the final thing that we need is a motion to approve the report as amended. Yes, you may. Absolutely.
So through the chair to Mr. Sarin, I just know we've all been busy. Has there been any follow-up with the gubernatorial candidates? Did any of them respond to the letter this committee sent out? And
I suppose I could come up there, but the answer is no, we've received no response that I've seen.
I'm going to correct that statement. We have received one response. We received a response from Mr. Schiavone, who basically said that he recognizes the necessity for replacement of lost MCO tax revenue and promised to work on it. So we received that one response.
And to the chair, to Councilwoman Conwell, we're going to be making sure we're asking them as they're doing campaign events, so we'll make sure to relate that info.
okay. Very good. All right.
Is there a motion to approve the report as amended?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. The report is approved as amended. Okay. Under miscellaneous business, I would just like to take a moment to thank all of the members of the committee, particularly my vice chair, Ms. Conwell, but all the members of the committee and the staff for your diligent work and participation. We worked hard, and I think the general belief is that this committee took on more and did more than most people expected at the outset. I took when people came in on public comment and asked that the committee be continued, I took that seriously, but I also took that as a tremendous compliment that on the work that we had done, and I very much appreciated that, and I also want to say thank you to all the members of the community that participated, all the people that came in when we had the senior disabled presentation, all the people that came in on public comment, the executive director, Mr. Calabrese, who attended several meetings, and Eric and other people from RTA who participated. I appreciate that. It truly was a collaborative effort, and we worked together, and I think through both the successor organization and the scope change on the operations and intergovernmental committee, we've provided for the continuation of this work, and it needs to be done because public transportation is so essential to our economic and social well-being in this community. So again, thank you to everybody. Any further comments?
I
Ms.
just want
Conwell?
to, through the chair, just want to thank everyone as well, because the reality is no matter if you decide to take your car or if you're a car rider, those cars break down. And the reality is, what is your next mode if you gotta get a car the next day? Well, most likely you go to your transit. You don't call Uber, because if you got a major car issue, Uber's gonna run you some money for the week that you could be using to repair your car. I mean, these are just things that we think about on a day-to-day basis. So I think we did great work, everybody in this group, new and old, past members that are gone. I think we were all passionate in our day-to-day works of whatever we do about transportation, and not only the people that need it, but the working poor, as I say, because we have the indigent and now we have the working poor, and hopefully there's a middle class, but we all need public transportation in order for our development. And I was just wondering in the final report, because it did change. When it first came out, I read it all, but then it's had some changes, so I don't know to go back to the original or not. But did we, for the secondary group of stakeholders, did we have anyone in there in regards to development? Did we have any development stakeholders? Because Mr. Johnson made a good point, and several people throughout this committee. One thing that I do in terms of homelessness, when the developers come to me about building market rate housing, my mantra is like, well, how many affordable units you gonna give me? Because we need to move people. And I think we need to start saying that to developers that come here in the county and as well as the city for public dollars. It's like, what are you going to do for transportation? But I just don't know if we started with...
We have the Greater Cleveland Partnership Economic Development, and we also have the Community Development CDCs. So it's well covered.
So, okay, so when we...
Mr. Chair, the Fund for Our Economic Future, I believe, were they also in there?
Carol Caruso.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure, that's how we have to look at things today, how we all pay our share. And just me as a taxpayer myself, I'm just tired of everybody burdening everything on us.
Are you suggesting adding the Fund for Our Economic Future?
If they're not there.
Yeah, they're not, and that's an oversight. And I think we can do that as a non-substantive correction, and I'll just make a note of that.
So thank you all for your hard work.
Thank you.
Okay, has anybody signed in for public comment unrelated to the agenda?
No one has signed in.
There being no further business before this committee, I'd like to wish everybody a very Merry Christmas and a happy, successful, improved public transportation 2018, and we stand adjourned. Thank you very much.
Hey, so we want to get together with you.